His black eyes never left me. His gaze was disconcerting. It seemed that he was searching for something hidden in my face. I didn't know what to make of it, and I did my best to provide polite conversation, but he refused to talk. When the meal was finished, he finally began to speak. You've never heard his voice, so it's hard for me to make you understand what it was like. His words were entrancing, like a snake whispering gilded lies into my ears. A more convincing and frightening man I've never heard. He wove a vision, a fantasy of the empire as he imagined it. There would be beautiful cities built across the country, filled with the greatest warriors, artisans, musicians and philosophers. The Eagles would finally be eradicated, and the empire would expand in every direction until it reached the four corners of Alagaësia. Peace and prosperity would flourish, but more wondrous yet, the riders would be brought back to gently govern over Galbatorix fiefdoms. The dream he had painted for me was too compelling, too seductive to ignore. Ardour for his mission filled me, and I fervently pledged myself to him. In the late first stage of the Broadring Empire, a child destined to shake the very foundations of this mystical world was born. Galbatorix was born to a family of 10 siblings in the province of Inzelbeth. At the tender age of 10, Galbatorix was accepted into the dragon riding order when Jorn and Vosk hatched for him. Jorn and Vosk was a female dragon of a deep shade of purple. The duo's ascent was meteoric, heralding the arrival of a formidable force within the ranks of the riders. Quickly mastering arts of warfare and magic, Galbatorix was filled with arrogance and pride, fueled by the adoration of other members of the order. However, a number of the elders in the council were wary of its meteoric rise to power. Galbatorix's training was finished at the age of 19, when he was sent with 2 of his companions to explore rumours of a threat to the far north of the Spine. When travelling through the Spine, tragedy struck in the form of a vicious Urgal ambush. The attack left Galbatorix wounded, his companions slain, and most devastatingly, resulted in the death of Jorn and Vosk, pierced by a stray arrow in the chaos. The loss of his dragon plunged Galbatorix into an abyss of despair, marking the beginning of his descent into madness. Haunted by grief, Galbatorix began to long for death. He wandered through the Spine, mercilessly killing anything that crossed his path, praying one of the creatures would end his misery. His training and high aptitude for magic proved too much, where even the warlike Urgals avoided him altogether. He left a trail of death and destruction in his wake. Sometime during this period, he came upon Nalgorgoth, the place where he was originally tasked with locating. A half-elf woman by the name of Bashel, the leader of the town, tended to his wounds and helped him recover to full health. During this time, Bashel began manipulating Galbatorix and planting the seed of an idea that the dragon riders may grant Galbatorix a new dragon. Bashel also introduced Galbatorix to Durza, a powerful shade under the influence of several dark spirits. Shades are a broad topic and will need their own video to fully explain them, but in essence, shades are the products of a sorcerer or sorceress who had summoned spirits that were too powerful for them to control, becoming possessed in both mind and body, with often little of the sorcerer's personality and memories remaining. During his time in Nalgorgoth, Durza taught Galbatorix dark and forbidden magics, mainly on the subjugation of minds. In return, Galbatorix helped Durza restrain the spirits that controlled him. In a man riddled with grief, the machinations of Bashel and Durza bore fruit, and seemingly of his own will, Galbatorix set out to return to the Dragon Riders to demand a new dragon. Although the journey on Dragonback was swift, his returning journey was plagued by starvation and disease. He was found unconscious at the outer edges of the Spine by a farmer and was brought back to the home of the Driders on Vrongard. Once he had recovered sufficiently, he stood before the Elder Riders and demanded that they grant him a new dragon. Aromas and Glader convinced the other riders on the council to deny Galbatorix's request. As one of the riders who showed concern of Galbatorix's meteoric rise and arrogance, Aromas saw through the masquerade of grief and saw the true darkness that had taken root inside Galbatorix. This rejection fueled Galbatorix's vendetta against the order that had once been his family. Thus, the stage was set for a tale of betrayal, power, and a thirst for vengeance that would engulf Alagaësia in flames. Galbatorix's early life and fall from grace is not just a story of personal tragedy, but a harbinger of the tumultuous times that were to follow. It is a narrative that delves deep into the complexities of loss, the corrupting influence of power, and the thin line between heroism and tyranny. In secret, Galbatorix finished his education of the dark arts with Durza. With an arsenal of dark tools and magic, he manipulated a sympathetic rider into assassinating an elder rider, and then continued to murder the rider and dragon, seizing his Eldenari before fleeing into the wild. He hid from the retribution of the riders in the dark wilds of northern Alagaesia, hell-bent on breaking down the mind of the Eldenari, turning it into a tool for him to use. We can't move on from here without discussing the Eldenari, for context of Galbatorix's history. The Eldenari are large gemstones that contain the souls of dragons. Even if a dragon's physical body is destroyed, its spirit will survive as long as its Eldenari is kept safe. When a rider carries an Eldenari, he or she can draw upon the dragon's power when casting spells. The Eldenari in essence is a consciousness of the dragons. Being subjected to the constant torment and mental attacks from Galbatorix would be a fate worse than death. After eventually gaining mastery of the Eldenari, he came across an arrogant and cruel human rider named Murtagh, who needed little convincing to join Galbatorix's cause. In Murtagh's first act of treachery, he opened the gate of the elf city of Illyria, allowing Galbatorix to enter and steal the dragon hatchling named Shuriken. With the new hatchling, Galbatorix and Murtagh fled to Nalgorgoth. Through the use of dark magic and rituals, Galbatorix created a bond with Shuriken, a perverted copy of the true bond between a dragon and rider. As he waited for Shuriken to grow to a full size, Galbatorix began Murtagh's training in dark magic. Besides Murtagh, 12 other corrupt riders came to serve Galbatorix out of greed, arrogance, or otherwise some kind of desire for vengeance for perceived wrongs, or the desire to tear down what had been built. These 13 riders would be known as the Forsworn. Accompanied by his followers, Galbatorix returned to challenge the Order of Dragon Riders, although vengeance wasn't his first priority. He began to acquire as many Eldenari as he could get his hands on. Any rider he came across, he murdered, often torturing the rider, forcing their dragon to release their Eldenari, and then killing them both. He eventually seized the whole Eldenari collection, which was left guardless by the dragon riding order in an utter mistake. Upon discovering the betrayal of the 13 Forsworn, the dragon community was consumed with fury. In a remarkable display of collective magical prowess, the dragons enacted a spell of profound consequence. They erased every conceivable identifier of the Forsworn's dragon, obliterating their birth names, true names, and any titles they held. This spell was so complete that these dragons were rendered unable to recognise or even refer to themselves as dragons, effectively ripping of their identity and place within the world. The consequences of the spell was catastrophic. For the Forsworn's dragons, stripped of their self-identity, they gradually deteriorated in intellect, devolving into primitive, wild creatures. This transformation inflicted deep sorrow and despair upon their riders, who could only bear witness to this heart-wrenching decline in silence. The magic's impact was so severe that it led to madness among at least 5 of the Forsworn's dragons and several of their human counterparts. With the wealth of power stolen from the Eldenari, Galbatorix hunted down his teachers and elders of the Dragon Riders, which culminated in a battle with the head of the order, Betrayal, at Duru Arabia in Vrongard. During the battle, Betrayal's dragon was killed. However, Betrayal initially bested Galbatorix, but in a moment of hesitation, Galbatorix used his chance to deal a vicious blow, forcing Betrayal to flee. Galbatorix further hunted Betrayal and decapitated him after striking him underhandedly in the groin. With the riders' leader murdered and the order decimated, Galbatorix rose as the most powerful being in Alagaesia. With the order gone, the human, dwarf, and elf kingdoms tried to mount a resistance, but with the Eldenari providing Galbatorix the power of hundreds of dragons, no one was powerful enough to challenge him. Galbatorix and his followers defeated both the elves and the dwarves, both of whom afterwards went into hiding. Galbatorix then captured Illyria with the Forsworn, where he deposed and murdered King Angrenost, the rightful ruler of the Brodrin Kingdom. With this act, he proclaimed himself the new monarch of Alagaesia, renamed the city of Illyria to Urubane. From then on, his name came known simply as the Empire. Upon declaring himself the ruler of Alagaesia, He became deeply involved in the governance of the Brothering Empire, yet he predominantly confined himself to the darkness of his fortress in Urubane, the city once known as Illyria. Over 4 decades he consolidated his power, subjugating a vast collection of Eldunari, and ventured outside his stronghold only on rare occasions. During this period, his empire plunged into disarray. Having subdued the wills of the dragons trapped within the Eldunari, Galbatorix launched a ferocious and ruthless military campaign aimed at reasserting control over the tumultuous Brothering Empire. Brom, a dragon rider who survived the tragic loss of his dragon Saphira during the Battle of Doro Arabia, was driven by a desire of vengeance against Morzan and Galbatorix. He united a diverse group of individuals, those exiled, imprisoned, or maltreated by the Empire, to form a resistance known as the Varden. This group established its base beyond the Haderach Desert, in territories beyond Galbatorix's reach, leveraging a sophisticated network of spies and agents spread across Alagaësia. The Varden rapidly emerged as a formidable challenger to the Brothering Empire. Under Brom's leadership, the Varden executed a series of successful assassinations against the Forsworn, with Brom personally eliminating 2 and playing a key role in the demise of 5 others. This left Morzan as the sole survivor among the Forsworn, marking a significant blow to Galbatorix's circle of trusted allies. Galbatorix came across a left Blacker, who he had made an agreement with. For their loyalty and service, Galbatorix would protect them and provide a limitless supply of human flesh to sustain them. The left Blacker's offspring, the Razak, became Galbatorix's personal dragon hunters, travelling across the Empire, searching for surviving dragons. Following the demise of the Dragon Riders, Galbatorix found himself in possession of the last 3 dragon eggs known to exist in Alagaësia. With a vision to establish a new order of dragon riders under his dominion, he endeavoured to have these eggs hatched for his followers, but to no avail. In a daring move, the Varden employed a thief named Heffring to abscond with the eggs, although Heffring's attempt only resulted in the acquisition of a single egg. Morzan, in hot pursuit of Heffring, was led to Gilead, where Brom, fueled by a relentless thirst for vengeance against Morzan, awaited. In a decisive confrontation, Brom vanquished Morzan, thereby extinguishing the last of the Forsworn. Brom then ensured the stolen eggs safe for delivery to the Varden, subsequently seeking refuge in Carverhall, where he remained incognito for nearly 15 years. Years after the dramatic events surrounding the dragon eggs, Galbatorix extended an offer of friendship to Murtagh, Morzan's son, who had been residing in Galbatorix castle following his parents' demise. Despite understanding the potential folly in accepting, Murtagh found himself drawn to Galbatorix's ambitious vision of transforming the Brothering Empire into a utopian society. Faced with a monstrous directive to massacre the villagers, Murtagh chose defiance over obedience and plotted escape from Urubane with Tornak, his loyal mentor. Galbatorix, having foreseen the possibility of treachery, had already stationed guards at the city's exits. Although Murtagh managed to breach the blockade, Tornak fell during the escape. Seeking refuge with an individual he believed to be an ally proved to be grave misjudgment, as Galbatorix was promptly informed of Murtagh's whereabouts. Opting for calculated patience, Galbatorix decided to leave Murtagh in his supposed sanctuary, biding his time until Murtagh could come to terms with Tornak's death. Galbatorix also took control of many Urgal clans, placing Durza in command. Durza had originally negotiated with the Urgals, enchanting them with dark magic and eventually bending them to his will. One night, Durza and the Urgals ambushed the elven dragon egg courier, Arya, while she was transporting the egg back to the Varden. Although Durza and the Urgals managed to capture Arya, their mission ultimately failed when Arya teleported the egg to the spine, where it would be discovered by a young farm boy named Eragon. In his relentless pursuit of the last dragon egg, Galbatorix commanded the Razak to track it down. Their search led them to Carverhall in the secluded Palancar Valley. Eragon, however, managed to evade their grasp, and Galbatorix later received confirmation that the egg had indeed chosen Eragon as its rider. With Eragon's emergence as a dragon rider, Galbatorix, apprehensive about potential rebellion in the north, led by local farmers, initiated what would become known as the Northern Massacres. He orchestrated a widespread raid by the Urgals on settlements suspected of harbouring Varden sympathisers. This campaign saw entire towns ravaged and their populations brutally exterminated. Yazuak, for instance, witnessed the mass murder of its inhabitants, their bodies grotesquely amassed in the town's core. While some communities like Daret managed to repel the Urgal onslaughts, others, such as Carver Hall, remained untouched, shielded by the natural fortress of the Spine. To obscure the truth of these atrocities from the wider empire, Galbatorix spread falsehoods, alleging the Varden and Urgals had made an alliance, painting the rebels as the true culprits behind the carnage. The Razaks' hunt for the egg eventually led them to confront Eragon and Brom in Drasleona, where they fatally wounded Brom in a skirmish south of the city. Their victory was short-lived, as Murtagh, tracking both Eragon and the Razak, intervened, forcing the assassins to retreat. As Eragon and his allies made their way south towards the Boa Mountains, seeking refuge with the hidden Varden, the Urgals doggedly pursued them. Galbatorix crafted a sinister strategy aimed at annihilating the rebellion, the Urgals, and the dwarves in one fell swoop. His scheme involved launching a comprehensive assault on the Varden and the dwarves at the stronghold in Trondheim, nestled beneath the mountain of Varden. Utilising the Urgals for this onslaught, Durza was appointed to lead this formidable charge. Galbatorix aimed to capture Eragon and Sphera to resurrect the new order of dragon riders under his dominion. He wanted to recapture Murtagh and subsequently marshal his military might against the elves, bringing them under his sway. In this battle, these plans went astray. Eragon defeated and killed Durza, while the combined dwarf and human resistance managed to fend off the Urgals. With Durza killed, the Urgal clans turned on each other, as Urgals traditionally do not fight together. In the aftermath of the battle, Galbatorix's agent in the Varden organised an ambush, killing the Varden's leader, Ajihad, and capturing Murtagh. In a twist of fate, one of the dragon eggs hatched for Murtagh, who named the dragon Thorn. In response to Murtagh's defiance, Galbatorix subjected him to severe torture, aiming to bend Murtagh to his will, while ensuring Murtagh retained his mental autonomy, a more potent means of control than simply overpowering his mind. Murtagh held out against this coercion until the harrowing torture of Thorn, his newly bonded dragon, compelling him to pledge his allegiance to Galbatorix. Galbatorix then meticulously explored their minds to uncover the true names of Murtagh and Thorn, binding them to his service through oaths sworn in the ancient language. This act of domination turned Murtagh into Galbatorix's most formidable general, entrusting him with arcane knowledge previously undisclosed. To amplify Murtagh's strength, Galbatorix granted him access to several Eldonari, significantly boosting his magical capabilities to surpass those of Eragon and even the elves. However, the Eldonari provided to Murtagh were specifically chosen from dragons who had died young, and Galbatorix retained the majority for his own use. Furthermore, he deliberately restricted Murtagh's education in magic to prevent any future threat of rebellion against his rule. Despite these constraints, Murtagh's enhanced power, augmented by the Eldonari, positioned him as a force more potent than any member of the Forsworn, surpassing even his father's prowess. In the months that ensued, Galbatorix's patience for Serda and its support of his adversaries wore thin. Serda, situated on the southern coast of Alagaesia, had become a thorn in his side. The Urgals, feeling betrayed by Galbatorix's manipulation, decided to side with the Varden, leaving the king to rely on his regular forces. Despite the Empire's efforts, the forces of Serda and the Varden became aware of the impending imperial invasion and advanced northwards to confront them at the Burning Plains. This clash saw Murtagh and Thorn, under strict orders to capture Eragon and Sphera, engage in fierce combat with them. While Murtagh and Thorn held the upper hand, Murtagh's affection for Eragon led him to allow their escape, influenced by Eragon's heartfelt entreaties for mercy and release. Galbatorix's fury knew no bounds when he discovered Murtagh had allowed Eragon and Sphera to elude capture. His anger was further inflamed upon learning of the Razak's demise at the hands of Eragon and Sphera, a calamity he believed he could have averted had Murtagh and Thorn adhered to their instructions. In a fit of rage, Galbatorix executed 5 servants in his immediate vicinity before unleashing his anger on Murtagh and Thorn. He then dispatched Murtagh, along with a contingent of his insensate foot soldiers, to Surda under more stringent commands to seize Eragon and Saphira. Yet this operation too was doomed to failure, as Eragon and Saphira, with the assistance of Arya and a dozen elves, managed to repel Murtagh and Thorn. The news of elves launching attacks on the northern frontiers of his empire prompted Galbatorix to attack decisively, opting for an offensive approach rather than a defensive stance. He sent Murtagh to Gilead to engage the elven forces directly. An aerial duel over Gilead saw Aromas and Glader pitted against Murtagh and Thorn. During this confrontation, Galbatorix made a psychic intrusion into Murtagh's mind, extending an invitation to Aromas to defect to his side, an offer that Aromas staunchly refused. The battle raged on until a moment of vulnerability struck Aromas. A sudden seizure caused him to drop his sword embedded with protective wards. Seizing this opening, Galbatorix manipulated Murtagh, delivering a fatal blow to Aromas. Glader then re-engaged in combat with Thorn, but was overpowered and met a swift death as Thorn inflicted a mortal wound to his head and neck. As the tide of war shifted, with the Varden seizing control of Bellatona and Drasleona, Galbatorix plotted to eliminate Nasuada, the Varden's new formidable leader. Fate intervened when Murtagh, learning of the king's deadly intent, intervened on her behalf, arguing that Nasuada's tactical acumen made her an asset worth preserving. Persuaded by the logic in Murtagh's plea, Galbatorix tasked him with capturing Nasuada instead. Once taken, Nasuada found herself confined within the oppressive walls of Urubane, subjected to Galbatorix's cruel attempts to coerce her allegiance through torture, aiming to bind her to his will with an oath spoken in the ancient language. However, Galbatorix was unaware that Murtagh, drawn increasingly into Nasuada's orbit, was aiding her to endure the king's brutalities. Over time, the shared adversity nurtured a deep, unlikely love between Murtagh and Nasuada. Driven by a mix of desperation and affection, Murtagh rationalised that the only path to Nasuada's freedom lay in a grand, albeit grim, bargain: the capture of Eragon and Saphira to satisfy Galbatorix's demands. This decision underscored the complex web of loyalty, love and betrayal that entangled the lives of those caught in the struggle against Galbatorix's tyranny. As the alliance of the Varden, elves and dwarves finally made their approach to Urubane, Galbatorix prepared for the looming confrontation. He entrusted the city's defence to Lord Barst, arming him with one of his own Eldunari, enhancing Barst's strength and resolve. Additionally, Galbatorix imbued his soldiers within the city with immunity to pain, and wove complex spells using the name of names around Urubane, a strategy designed to disrupt and manipulate the magic of his adversaries. These spells were calibrated to either neutralise enemy magic or pervert its effects against them. In the heart of the conflict, Eragon, Saphira, Arya and Elva faced Galbatorix in a dire confrontation. Utilising the name of names, a profound secret extracted from the tablet crafted by a foreign race, Galbatorix immobilised them, further complicating the standoff with the presence of 2 young hostages, deterring any direct assault. Galbatorix's astonishment at discovering Umaroth among the Eldunari with Eragon was short-lived, as he disclosed his intention to dominate all of Alagaësia's magicians through the power of the name of names. Rejecting subterfuge, Eragon challenged Galbatorix to a decisive, straightforward combat to determine Alagaësia's fate. Dismissive of such notions of fairness, Galbatorix instead orchestrated a duel between Eragon and Murtagh, stipulating it to be not lethal and devoid of magical or Eldunari influence. In this tense moment, Eragon unveiled the truth of his paternity, claiming Brom, not Morzan, as his father, a revelation that Galbatorix conceded as truthful. Eragon emerged victorious in the duel, leading to an unexpected turn when Murtagh, swayed by his brother's plight and perhaps his own conscience, betrayed Galbatorix. Murtagh leveraged his newfound understanding of his true name to dismantle most of Galbatorix's protective wards. In retaliation, Galbatorix sought to subdue Eragon, attempting to coerce his allegiance through a mental onslaught. However, it was the very extremity of Galbatorix's force that precipitated his downfall, marking the end of his tyrannical reign and heralding a new era for Alagaësia. In the climactic confrontation with Galbatorix, Eragon employed a spell of empathy, crafted without the use of the ancient language, but bolstered by the collective might of the Eldinari. This ingenious spell compelled Galbatorix to experience the full spectrum of suffering and emotions he had inflicted upon others throughout his life, predominantly anguish and despair. Since this was not an overt assault but a form of profound communication, and given that Murtagh had already dismantled many of his protective wards, Galbatorix found himself exposed and defenceless against it. The intense emotional onslaught of the spell incapacitated Galbatorix, rendering him unable to effectively engage Eragon in swordplay. At one point, although Eragon's leg gave out due to an earlier injury, presenting Galbatorix with a fleeting chance to strike, the overwhelming pain induced by the spell thwarted any attempt he made to capitalise on Eragon's vulnerability. With Galbatorix reeling from the spell's torturous effects and bereft of his wards, Eragon delivered a fatal blow. In his final moments, Galbatorix, overwhelmed by the unbearable emotional torment, beseeched Eragon to dispel the agony. Eragon's refusal led to the despot, in a last act of despair, to utter, "Be not," enacting a spell of self-annihilation that obliterated his very existence. The act transformed him into a cataclysmic explosion of energy, potent enough to annihilate everyone in the vicinity had Eragon not quickly erected a protective barrier. The detonation razed the castle, inflicted widespread destruction upon the city and its besieging forces, and left a haunting, persistent aftermath reminiscent of a nuclear fallout. This moment not only marked the end of Galbatorix's tyrannical reign, but also left a scar on the landscape and memory of Alagaësia. Galbatorix's character is a complex tapestry of ambition, pain, and a desperate craving for control. His vision for Alagaësia was one of order and peace, but it was a peace born from subjugation and fear, a peace maintained through the suppression of free will. His madness was not inherent, but cultivated from years of isolation, loss, and unquenchable thirst for power that ultimately led to his downfall. The tragedy of Galbatorix lies not in his defeat, but in the reflection of what he could have been had the path of vengeance not consumed him. The aftermath of Galbatorix's reign left Alagaësia at a crossroads. The liberation from tyranny brought about a fragile peace, but also the daunting task of rebuilding a world torn by decades of oppression. His legacy was a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked power, the corrosive nature of absolute authority, and the thin line between justice and revenge. Yet it also opened the door for new beginnings, for healing, and the opportunity for the diverse people of Alagaësia to forge a future based on mutual respect. Thanks everyone for joining me today. It was great to explore the rich and dark history of Galbatorix. Let me know what you think of these longer videos, if you prefer these or shorter videos instead. Thanks for the comments and love guys, it honestly means the world to me to see so many people enjoying this content. Thanks for watching, any recommendations, drop them below. Thanks guys, bye.